Hello, this is Grandmaster Ben Feingold. This is our last lecture at the Chess Center, but I will be doing these from my basement, so it'll be better quality or something. It'll be something. Yeah, there'll be dogs barking. This lecture is on your favorite player, Vlastimil Hort, and the reason he's your favorite player is because you've heard of him. And we want to thank our sponsor. Although he was already thanked before by Tom Hanks. Our sponsor is Jay Wilson. Okay. Thanks to Mr. Wilson for his generous support. We have more people in here than usual because we tricked them into thinking this is our last, this is the last bastion of a scoundrel? Yeah, scoundrel. Yeah, that's it. Now, most people haven't heard of Vlastimil Hort, but they have a good excuse. Most people haven't heard of anybody. So Vlastimil Hort was one of the top 20 players in the world for about 20 years, and he was in the top 10 for maybe about 5. He was born in Czechoslovakia, a country that no longer exists. So you know he was good. Yeah, Karen's looking in. The Wikipedia page says he was one of the strongest players in the 60s and 70s. I agree with that. He's known today, like even after he stopped playing seriously but plays for fun, he's known as being very funny and gregarious and having a funny voice. And I used to do Hort imitations when I was on tour, and people that knew him thought it was very funny because I do a good Hort. I'm pretty good at Hort. Hort has a very high voice. And he likes to talk about things that happened like Yasser. He's like, it starts with It's okay. In 1963, I played this position against Lubomir Kavalik. He also lived in a country that no longer exists. Like that. It's funny because I just pulled Kavalik out of nothing and he's also Czech. So it's total coincidence. He's played basically many, many world champions. He's been the national champion of Czechoslovakia and or the Czech Republic forever. And then later in his career, he defected to Germany, and he's played for Germany ever since. Although now that he's 77, he doesn't play for the national team, but he still plays occasionally. As you all know, hey, Perrier, they don't know it. As you all know, in the Soviet Union versus the rest of the world match, which you're all familiar with, except for one thing, in 1970, the most funny thing about that match is that Larson said, "I'm board 1." And then Fischer said, "Okay, I don't know which is crazier. Larson insisting on board 1 or Fischer saying, yeah, that's fine." That's not what Fischer usually does. Anyway, Larson lost the famous game to... What?
Spassky?
Yeah. And what's funny, what most people don't know, including me, is Larson actually got a plus score on board 1. But the only game that's known is the game he lost. Truth hurts. And then Fischer beat... What's that? Yeah, Petrosian. Yeah, he beat Petrosian on board 2. Rest of the team, not so good. So the rest of the world lost badly, except Vlastimil Hort did pretty good. He got plus 1 against Polagaevsky. So, of the rest of the world team, go Hort. All right. And he played in candidates tournaments, matches, interzonals. You can see in the Olympiad, he played in these Olympiads. And then for Germany, when he was German. And he played a simul against 636 players. Okay? Now, I wanted to do that, but I had to take a nap. So I dreamed that I did. And I still only played 610 in my dream. So that was terrible. He's a very funny commentator, as I pointed out. He has a lot of funny... He's basically Yasser before Yasser. But, in German. Yeah. And then there's, and so forth. Now, one of the reasons I like Hort is I have a friend, well, like you. You had a friend. I have a friend too. And we'll get to that later. We'll get to the friend thing. Let's see, this isn't good, is it? I don't know. Okay. Hey, can anybody on the internet, well, you don't want to see me, that's for sure. Okay, that was good. Got rid of that. Can anybody on the internet see the Hort Portisch game? Hello? People watching? Looks good. You can see Hort Portisch? All right. All right, then we'll get rid of it if you can see it. Bam! That was mean of me, but it had to be done. Okay, so let me, stop clicking on stuff. Let me move this over. See, I did good.
You're doing great.
I blame society.
Me too.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, get out of the way. All right. That still blocks the players, so that's good. Okay, hopefully you can still see it, but probably not. I mean, you can, but they can't. Yeah. Okay, so this is Hort Portisch. Can the people watching on the internet see d4, knight f6? Okay, and if you're watching on YouTube after the fact, can you see it? Okay, good. Now, probably more people have heard of Lajos Portisch than Hort, right? And Portisch played in the candidates many times, and like Hort, Portisch is still alive. And I lost to Portisch, and I never played him. I lost to his brother, Ferenc Portisch, and then some. His brother's like a low-rated IM, but he crushed me before you guys were born. Okay, now Hort liked to play aggressively and interesting, which is good for our lecture. So that's good. That's a good thing. Okay, so he's playing Portisch. He's white. Now, they got to a position that was played 1,000,000 years ago in an Alekhine game, and A6 was played in this Alekhine game, and white played C5, and people stopped playing A6. Now, the gawking rabble on the internet, which is everyone, they said, why would Portisch play a line that's been discredited for years? Doesn't he know it? And they shook their head derisively. Now, there's two possible answers. One is he didn't know it, which is what I'll go with. And the other is Portisch had his own stuff going, and he thought it was fine. And based on the way the game went, I'm not going with that. But maybe. Usually what happens when moves are played that were considered bad, that's because, the guy has something new, not because he didn't know it. But since that was in the 1920s, maybe he didn't know it. Okay. Now the reason this isn't good is if white does play c5 prematurely, black can play b6 and put a lot of pressure on the pawn. And if you take on b6, black can take back with the a pawn and then play c5 and so forth. After a6, you can't take with the a pawn. So now if you play b6, I don't care, I'll just take it. And life continues with this bishop being very unhappy. Now, most people who play a6 have an idea. Their idea is they want to take on c4, play b5 attacking the bishop, and bishop b7. So obviously after c5, white says, aha, your bishop is bad, which in 1973 was allowed. You could say, aha, yeah. Okay, and then in this position, white took on b6, and he said, take on me because of aha. Most of you are pretending you got that. I'm guessing he actually did. Wow. Okay. Take my pawn. All right. Now in this position, Portisch made a very dangerous move. Like the movie Dangerous Moves, which is a chess movie. Yeah. True story. I don't know if I recommend it because I forgot. I think Christopher Lambert's in it. So it doesn't sound good, but what are you going to do? And he took on b2, the poison pawn. And somehow he's still alive. So the poison wasn't too good. So black is wasting a lot of time and keeping his bishop bad forever to win this somewhat useless pawn. But it's a pawn. Grandmasters like pawns. And it's funny because Hort is like Saruman before Yasser, and he's playing Portisch, who like Yasser is taking pawns dangerously. So it's like Hort versus Saruman, except these players are better. That's all. Okay, so knight a4 attacking the queen. Portisch saw his queen was attacked. And then here comes the attack. So right away, Hort tries to win his pawn back. So he doesn't let him. And then he wins it back anyway because the knight's pinned. Now, if we go back to this position, if instead we take this and I take this piece, you can't play knight to d7 because your bishop would be attacked. Positionally, you're in a lot of trouble, and tactically, you're in trouble. Because once I trade the bishops, your c-pawn's not defended. And even if it was, I could play queen c2 attacking h7 and c6. And this knight's going to be good. So he decided to play c5. He can't take with the knight because it's pinned, so he took with the bishop. And white already won his pawn back, and then he played bishop takes f6 to ruin black's pawn structure on the king's side. Obviously, this is terrible for black. So I don't think he had preparation for a6. I think he just didn't know it was bad. Okay, queen g4. Now, obviously, if white plays rook takes c5 and then plays on the queen's side, the a6 pawn is weak. I have the c file. The king side is weak. But probably I wouldn't show you the game then. Okay, I show you the game because Hort stacks all his pieces and mates them. Right, this is a lecture. Come on. Okay, so check. Queen h4, threatening queen takes h7 mate with advantage. So black played f5. Okay, now, many of you have heard me say always repeat. And then you furrow your brow in a vain attempt to understand the situation. Okay, and then that's why we have snacks outside. That way, you might not know what I'm talking about, but they're snacks. So, right? Yeah. Okay. Now, in this game, Hort repeats so much, it makes me look bad. Right? It's like he invented it. Okay. So always repeat. Okay. So that's good. Then he took on c5. And he didn't, this is what Yasser calls a free attack. White has an attack, and white didn't sacrifice anything. So that's a free attack. Okay, this is very common in Tibet, this opening, because, free Tibet. Okay, so bishop c6, time to repeat again. It's always time to repeat. Rook b1 attacking the queen. The other idea is to play like rook b4, and then move it on over, slide it on over. Recommended by George Thorogood. What?
That's right. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, so rook b4. Rook a7 is actually a pretty cool defending move. There's positions where white's attacking on the king's side, and black's going to play f6 and defend this, and now his queen could go to e5 later if this queen starts doing something mean. So this is purely defensive, and he could play queen e7 if it's his turn. So repeat, right? Always repeat. Then he doubles up on the b file. Bishop b5, trying to trade the bishops. Rook g4 check. Now in this position, probably black should take the rook because there's no other move. Okay. And then queen h6. Now, of course, I would have played queen f6, but always repeat. Now, what's funny about this is we're threatening checkmate, and because of the defensive rook a7, the rook is not defended anymore, so we're threatening queen f8 mate. Now, many of you have seen Portisch's best games, or some good games, or you heard of them, and just looking at this one game, you wouldn't think very much of him. You're like, well, he just got mated, he's no good. Okay? That's what happens when we show people the bad games where their opponent was good and crushed them. So Portisch resigned because here's checkmate and here's checkmate. It's hard to defend. And based on that one game, I think Portisch didn't know the a6 line, but Hort did. And Portisch went too far when he took on b2. He didn't even win a pawn. because white got his pawn back immediately and started the big attack. So if you've never heard of Hort, and you haven't, that's pretty good the way he took Portisch to school, because Portisch was a many-time candidate. Okay, F11. Okay, can you guys see the next position on the internet? Sometimes F11 works, sometimes it doesn't. What do you say, John? Okay, let me flip the board. I don't know how to do that, so give me like an hour. Okay. So Hort played some kind of Dutch, okay? And probably that's because it makes sense. He was Czech, and then he was German, so now he's playing the Dutch, okay? His opponent is Swiss, so he had no opinion on the matter. It's very neutral, right? Okay, and in fact, when the game started, Werner Hug wanted to use a gray board, but black gets the option. So they used a normal board. All right, as long as you get it, that's all that matters. Okay, he got crushed so badly, Werner Hug, that he thought he wasn't going to make it, so he told his second, tell my wife hello. Didn't get that one? Come on. Watch more Futurama. Okay, so Hort is black, and he's playing very aggressively, Dutch. He's like, I don't care if I lose a pawn, as long as I'm attacking, and so forth. Okay, so he played knight f6, defending his pawn, proving me wrong. Never play f3, never. g5, queen e8. He wants to, get this queen in here and start attacking. King g2 and queen h5. So black has a big attack, and these pieces aren't doing a good job defending. Put it in h3. Queen back to g6. And you got to watch it here. You got to be careful. H3 is actually a very weakening move. Now when black moves his pawns, white's pawns are moving up the board, so they're closer to black's pawns. He defended his queen again. Black doubled on the F file, and then G4 was played instead of taking back, forcing H4, and then E5. So E5 is probably not a move I would consider, but it stops white from doing anything like E5 himself. And the problem with taking with the knight, which I would probably still do, is that the knight's pinned to the queen. And he figures, well, if the guy plays E5, that's annoying. But if he doesn't play E5, because I played E5, then I'll just take the pawn when I feel like it. Okay, so he felt like it. And then he doubled rooks. So very Morphy-esque, using all of his pieces to attack. And again, it's a free attack. They're not all free attacks. Some of them he's going to give some pieces away, but didn't give anything away here. Okay, bishop g1, always retreat. He wants to put his knight on e3. Now, even though I hadn't started streaming in the 1970s, it's still time to sack everything and mate. Bishop h4 and rook f3. Always sack everything. So what was the point of bishop h4? Well, if white doesn't take it, it wins a pawn. So that would be good if he doesn't take it. If he does take it, he's half opening the g file, which that punishes. As you can see, pawn takes is pretty risky. Double check and queen g2. That's the drunken queen g2. And so forth. So Hort was a pretty good attacking player, especially when he had all his pieces. Now, Werner Hug was an IM, and Hort's world class, so the truth hurts. Now, this is something most of you don't take into account. When you come to our chess center and you see an IM, you're like, ooh, okay? And maybe that's because you saw a ghost, I don't know. Maybe you just ate some Cheerios and you misread what it said. Okay, and you think, wow, that guy's good. Why did he lose to this other guy? Because that other guy's better. And when Hort plays people his own rating and the games are boring draws, you're not impressed. But if Hort plays people worse than him and crushes them, then you're more impressed. And that's because the top guys are better than the next class, and so forth. So if I play you guys, I look good. But if I play the top players in the world, I look less good. Although I do look pretty good. Okay, so knight e3 blocking the attack. rook g3 check. King moves to safety. Rook f2. He's got 2 rooks, 1 for each of you. Right? Now we're threatening rook h3 with advantage. Now, if that's not using all your pieces to attack, what is? Okay, and white resigned. Good resignation. Now, the reason he resigned isn't because he's getting mated, but if he stops the mate by taking, this at least wins the queen. So that's not good when, like, the guy's mating you and you're down a queen. Okay, so for example, here's a sample variation. If you take with a pawn, your knight's not defended. If you take with a rook, your king's not defended. Okay, and you're down a queen. So, bishop. I mean, like the last moves were brutal. Bishop takes, rook f3, and then rook f2. Man, the truth hurts. Okay, that's the guy you never heard of. Terrible. Okay, great attacking game, playing a weaker opponent. Okay, flip the board again. Okay, so this is obviously what opening? Yeah. And the first person ever to get this right, I was lecturing in Canada. I don't remember what city it was. It was a small city. It was like a suburb. And William Shatner was there because he's Canadian, which is weird. He knows how to play chess. And I said, what opening is this? And he said, Khan! And I was like, yeah, that's right. Okay, so both sides have an attack, except black's attack's not very good. You!
Did he say it to Fiddler on the Roof?
No, he didn't say that. That's my joke. Yeah. We'll get to that later. Okay, but yeah, that's good Family Guy reference. That's good, yeah. So the reason white's attack is better than black's is mainly because this pawn's on h6. So that means I can attack it quicker. And my pawns haven't moved, so it takes you longer. Okay. Also, my queen's pointing there, my bishop is, my knight, and these pieces aren't really helping with black's attack. Now, what's funny about this is Murray Chandler, who's British and Australian, depending on what year it is, he likes to attack. He doesn't like to defend. So he actually doesn't mind if they castle opposite sides and play crazy. And Chandler was one of the top players in Britain, but, you know, okay, it's not Hort. Okay, so G4, C5, I attack you, you attack me. G5, C4, which is explosive. Queen G3. It looks like white's attack's working and black's isn't. Now, I got to be honest. If I was black, I would not play C4 because I need pressure on D4. I can't, after this, there's no pawn takes D4, so the knight on E5 is solid. Okay, sort of like today's Marmaduke. Solid. Futurama. I mean, you'd have to really know Futurama well to get that, like Spencer. Okay, so he takes, and it's pretty clear if Chandler had played knight E4 that we always sack the exchange. But probably knight E4 is a better move. Right, but we sack the exchange and then play something like rook E1 because the rook's attacked, and then we continue with GH and so forth. And then, you know, white has an attack and black doesn't. So, okay, so he took and then played knight E4, so he's forcing the exchange sack. Then bishop takes, trade all the pieces off, and win the game, except for one thing. F6, never play F6. Yeah, although you don't play F6 and you take with the queen, for example, rook G1's annoying. So he's like, all right, let's stop the attack before it starts. H6, that's what you were going to play because you didn't see pawn takes queen. If you saw pawn takes queen, then you wouldn't play it. Again, Hort using all of his pieces to attack. Okay? And if you take, there's a pretty, it was so bad the computer would, if you take, then, you know, I check and checkmate's good with advantage. Yeah. Not only is it mate, but white has a nice passed pawn. Okay, so I'm assuming Chandler overlooked H6, otherwise he wouldn't have done all of this because this doesn't look good. Okay, so he played, well, it says he played f5. No. Oh, I know what happened. After h6, he resigned. That's why it doesn't say anything. Yeah. So black got a good attack over there. Yeah, except for one thing. Yeah. So now it looks like Hort from these games is like a 19th century player. He's just attacking and sacking and winning without any like resistance. And his opponents are pretty good. Chandler, Portisch, those guys are good. But, Hort was good in, 60s and 70s. Got to be good at some point. All right. Now this I just put in as a joke, but it's a very funny joke. It's good. Okay, we'll flip. Yeah. Okay, so in this position, this is a Ruy Lopez, obviously, exchange variation. And the guy attacked Hort's rook. And Hort broke my rule. And by breaking my rule, his opponent thought he had a tactical trick. So he used reverse psychology. He played f3. And then most of us would move our bishop. Black did not move his bishop. What move did black play? It was a blunder. But it's very funny why it's a blunder. What would you play other than moving your bishop? What other move do you have?
Bishop takes h2, queenside castle.
Rook to d8.
Yeah, rook d8 or queenside castle. Okay, and the idea is if we take this with check, we take the rook, and then this isn't very good. The engine actually says that's equal because it's a pretty strange position. Okay, castles loses instantly, as does rook d8. Because that guy you never heard of, right? That's why you never heard of him. It's not easy to find out why, but pretty easy for Hort. So, my opponent castled long, and I played. Black actually resigned after the next move.
Rook takes d6.
That loses. I take it and I have rook d1 check. Yeah. Very good. The 1200 player in my ear got it. They didn't hear you. They're all higher rated, so they're like, what? See, he's got his engine. No, he's not cheating. Yeah. No? Really? I can't believe you guys aren't as good as Hort.
Did he just...
Played one move and black resigned.
Bishop d2.
Who?
Bishop d2. Just blocking.
Well, I just moved my bishop off to g4.
e5.
There you go. e5. The truth hurts. Bishop h2? I don't think so. Now you got two bishops hanging, one for each of me. And you can't save them both. And the reason I wasn't taking this is bishop h2, but there ain't no more bishop h2. Take with the bishop, I can trade rooks with check, and then take your bishop. So, yeah. Obviously, he didn't see e5, which none of you saw either after so I yelled at you. Yeah. Now you lose a bishop. So super GMs normally don't play moves like castles, e5, and resign, but guys we never heard of, sometimes they do that. And then you're like, oh, e5. Now this is why chess is so difficult, because you're playing, unfortunately, you guys are playing a game, black castles, both players see bishop h2, and white just does something about it, like bishop d2 or something, or e1, and then nobody ever notices that e5 won. That's why you should analyze your games with an engine after, so you can truly see how bad tactically you are, right? And that's all the top players do, then they choke on their rage. Now, before engines were really, really, really good, when they were only really good, Kaidanov told me he analyzed all of his games 5 times by himself. He doesn't have any friends like we do. Yeah. So if you analyze your games a lot, you'll be like, oh, oops. But an engine will just tell you, like, you could have won a queen, and he could have won a rook. Then you're just like, why am I playing chess? I don't see anything. Yeah, I say that every day. But yeah, of the people who don't see anything, the super GMs see more. They blunder a lot less. When they do blunder, we make fun of them until my throat is sore, right? But other players who are club players who are watching on their computer screens, they blunder like every 5 moves. And these guys blunder like twice a year, but when they do, those games are analyzed all over the world and we got them, right? Luckily for Black, nobody's heard of him, so you guys don't know this game. But if Black was like Fischer or Kaspar, then you'd be like, man, remember that time he missed E5? This would be well known. But the guy's not well known, so truth hurts. All right, very good. Now, the last game I want to show you is very funny. And this is the surprise I was waiting for in the end. So, one of my best friends, if not my best friend, is Wesley Berger, who was my dad's best friend. But my dad passed away, so I was in the will. He said, now Wes is that's what happened. Okay, and Wes is actually 80 years old, but he doesn't want you to know that. And when Karen and I went to Michigan last week, we stayed at his place. Okay, he's not poor. Okay, and Wesley Berger not only is a good chess player, he's also played in backgammon and bridge tournaments. And in one bridge tournament, we actually did very well, but usually we don't do so well. But in fact, about 3 years ago, that was a guess, could have been 2 years ago or 4 years ago, we played in the Bridge Nationals in Atlanta. Me and Wes were one pair, and our teammates were former U.S. chess champion Stuart Rachels and his wife. And we actually played against the best Italian team. I forgot who did well that match, but it wasn't us. But I was recognized by several of the players who are good at bridge and chess, and then they crushed us at bridge. Okay, now Wes is a good friend of mine, and he beat Hort in the Canadian Open 1974. And in 1974, that's Hort around his peak. And Wes, who was about 2,300 at his peak, but that was in the 70s and 60s. That's like 3,500 now. He actually beat a couple of really strong grandmasters, And we'll look at it from Hort's point of view, because the lecture is on Hort, but he doesn't do well. Okay, and this is a very funny mistake he makes in this position. It's a French defense, obviously, and Wes made up a line, which he always plays, and everybody said that line's bad, which is true, and he says, if I ever lose the game, I'll stop playing it. Okay, and this is the Tarash French, where they play knight d2 on move 3, and Wes always plays f5, which doesn't have a good reputation, but he always won and drew with it, so he didn't care. And he also played the Dutch against d4, so he liked this pawn on f5. Okay, most people take the pawn on f5, but as you can see, Hort played e5 very early. And then Wes played knight h6 to f7. They developed their pieces, and we got to this position. Okay, and here Hort blundered. After a5, stopping b4, Hort played bishop e3. We'll just give it one question mark, because you guys could look for an hour and a half and not see why that's a mistake. If you saw it in like 5 seconds, that would be a blunder. But if you would never see it, then I'm not going to call it a blunder, because that would be mean, right? But for Hort's level of play, that's a very bad move. Okay, and this actually reminds me of a game I won on my birthday in 11 moves, because I played the same tactic, although I was white. Same tactic. All right, and we don't have an hour and a half left, so he took on d4, and after the recapture, Black has a way that wins a pawn, which I'm sure you all see now. See, that's why I can't call it a blunder. It's not fair. I mean, if Hort showed this to his homies from Bruges, they'd be like, dude, why'd you blunder? Because, if he shows it to super GMs, they're like, what are you doing? Anybody? No? Nothing?
Knight takes e5.
Ugh. Always sacking pieces. If you're going to sack a piece, do it this way, because he can't take it. If he takes it, then queen b4 check wins the rook. Right? Yeah, no, I mean, Hort should see that, but I'm not saying you guys would see it. But anyway, Wes saw it. Wes is like, gimme, 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 gimme. So Wes is a pawn up, right? And then he plays king f1. So now he's threatening to take the bishop. All right. And black's a pawn up and nothing else is happening. So they made a lot of moves that didn't really affect the result of the game. Hort tried to attack because he's down a pawn for nothing. Seemed like a good idea. Okay, and now black has the two bishops. What else? Doesn't seem like white's really attacking now. Attacks the h-pawn. Yeah, I like the way he always retreats, putting his pieces on better squares. This is good. All of a sudden, Wes is playing on the king side. Now, in the other games you saw, Hort was attacking. At the beginning of this, he had a big space advantage on the king side, and it looked like, some of them shows, oui? Okay, but no. C'est pas possible. So instead of him attacking, he blundered a pawn. Then he went a little crazy attacking because he didn't want to be down a pawn. And now it's sort of backfired. Now I think Black's king seems a lot more safe than white's because I don't see how white ever attacks black's king. How's this knight going to get in there? How are these pieces supposed to, yeah. However, I have the two bishops and I also have the what else. And my knight's pretty well placed in your territory, so you got to defend the entry squares. Luckily, there's more tactics, right? This wasn't a short game. This was a Hort game. All right. Put it in h-check in the e-pawn, and Wes says, take my e-pawn. I dare you. I double dare you. And the problem is, like, this is attacked, and this is attacked, and you got him caught in a little crossfire, right? You think Val Kilmer likes that? No, he didn't care. All right, so he took anyway. Bishop takes h4. Yeah, white's king looks like it's in trouble. King f1, run away. Rook f8, that's scary. Knight d1. So Hort is thinking, if we trade everything, I got you with rook c8 at the end. That's why he played knight d1, getting out of the way of his rook, which stops the rook from ever going to f3. Okay, and Aerosmith saw this song, and I messed the joke up. Aerosmith saw this position, talked to Run DMC about it, and the rest is history. It's tricky. No? Yeah. If you don't believe me, come here. Walk this way. All right. That was like 2 jokes. Okay, so he blocks rook c8. So now he's threatening the knight on f3, but if the knight moves, the d4 pawn's hanging. He's got him 6 ways from sun, and that's why it's good to have the 2 bishops. Man, that doesn't look good. That's looking bad for Hort. Rook c3 defending the knight. Bishop to g5. Now the bishop can go to d2. He can't take the bishop here. Retreats, defends his bishop. Always repeat. Good job, Wes, repeating. Look at that. Wes knew what he was doing. Now, most of you, if you were Wes Berger and you were 2300 and you're playing a world-famous grandmaster, you'd be like, all right, and knight c6, right? Frankly, that's a ridiculous attitude. That's the attitude low-rated players have. I drew, but he was higher rated than me. I don't think that's how Kasparov and Fischer got better. Maybe, but I don't think so. Knight c6, and Hort plays for the win. Although, after rook d3, I think black would have played for the win, but probably Hort could have claimed a draw, but he thought, I'm better than Wes Berger, which is somewhat true, but this is going too far. So he didn't want to draw. Wes knew the higher rated player would play for the win, and therefore make an inferior move. Now, I got to tell you my favorite story about that. Not my favorite story overall, but there was a game played between Karpov and van der Wiel. And Karpov was black. Van der Wiel is a Dutch GM you haven't heard of. And they played a line in the Ruy Lopez, which a lot of grandmasters do to force a draw, where it goes knight g5 attacking the f-pawn, rook e8, knight back to f3, rook e8, and so forth. And van der Wiel was white, so Karpov didn't mind a draw at that time. And they did the repetition. Now, they changed the rules. In FIDE, if it's a 5-time repetition, the arbiter can step in and say, okay, it's a draw. But then, this was 30 years ago, no, the players had to say repetition. And he knew Karpov wouldn't claim a repetition against him. So he just kept repeating. And they got to move 34 from like move 11. And then Vanderbilt just did something else. He just didn't want to get in time trouble against Karpov. And the game ended in a draw, and Vanderbilt was in trouble, but he drew anyway. But he says, yeah, I knew that Karpov wouldn't claim a draw because I'm Vanderbilt, I'm no good. And West was thinking that too. Hort's not going to claim a draw. Hort's just going to keep repeating and let West claim a draw, which he said he wouldn't do, or Hort will make an inferior move to not draw, and then I'll win. And Hort made the inferior move because Hort must have known about this lecture. He's like, man, I play pretty good. He saw those other games he played. He's like, I could beat this guy. Okay, always retreat. We don't want to trade the two bishops. Once again, bishop h5 is a draw because it's the same position like 6 times. Played here, attacking the d pawn. Bishop e4, king e1, which is a good move because it sets up for the next game. Now, queen f8. Now that's a lot of pressure on the f file. A lot of pressure. Knight takes, pawn takes. Knight d1, defending the f2 pawn. Rook h4. Man, the truth hurts. Knight takes d4. Now, after seeing this game, see, I forgot his name, so I can't make the joke. Terrible. What's his name? I don't know. I'll make the joke another lecture because I can't think of his name. Okay, so knight takes d4. The joke was, who's saying crash into me? Anybody?
Dave Matthews.
Dave Matthews. I knew, yeah. I was going to say Dave Matthews wrote the song Crash Into Me after he saw this game. All right, wasn't that good anyway. Now, Hort playing f3, terrible. Never play f3. Queen takes g5. The knight blocks the rook. Rook d3, terrible. Now, I don't have a lot to suggest for white here because white's king is ridiculous. It's just the worst. It's the worst. So I don't know what to tell you. And again, it's not only is it a free attack on white's king in the center, black's actually a pawn up. So that's even worse. Now, definitely, if I had white, I would play queen f6 check and go into the lost endgame. Because I'm probably going to lose my f6 pawn and be 2 pawns down. But okay, Hort played rook d3, which doesn't make any sense. Check here, takes, knight d4. And then after king c1, he resigned. That's good he resigned. He should have resigned before king c1. Because after a move like, I don't know, queen c3, the truth hurts. And then some. Yeah. Yeah, I always want to lecture when I show a top player from the past where me or somebody I know are related to beat him, but I never had the chance. The other top player that Wesley beat is Florin Gheorghiu, who's famous for beating Fischer. He was the top player in Romania since forever. Still is. Wait, is he alive? I think he's alive. He's not the top player now, but yeah. So that was the game Hort lost because probably he wasn't mentally prepared like he would be for a top player. His opponent's low rated, he has white, his space advantage, his opponent plays a bad opening, so you lose focus. You're like, this guy's no good, and he plays this opening, and I'm going to crush him. Then you miss a tactic here and there. You don't want to draw, then you lose. Happens to me all the time. That's why I don't play. Yeah. Otherwise, it won't happen. Happens to everybody. But Vlastimil Hort was one of the top players in the world for many years. He's a very funny guy. He still goes to chess tournaments. And the funniest thing I heard him say in person, well, I got 2 of them. In Vikonsay, at the end of the tournament, they give you, at the closing, they give you pea soup. And he gave like a 4-minute talk about the pea soup. He said, I've been having this pea soup for 30 years, and it tastes today the same it tasted 30 years ago. I think it's the same soup. Like they just keep giving, the same. And he was analyzing the last round of the famous game, Timon Salov, game 6 from their candidates match. in 1988. And I was actually there. It was in Canada. Okay? And in that game, Salov, they drew the first 5 games. It was a 6-game match. So, the 6th game, Salov had black in some kind of Dutch and played rook f6, rook h6, and played for mate. Then they traded queens. There was no mate, and the rook was trapped on h6. It couldn't get back into the game. So Hort was one of the commentators, and he said, if I was white, I'd play a4, a5, a6, a7, a8, queen. Another grandmaster said, you could also, he said, no. No, I play a4, a5, a6, a7, a8, queen. And he can't stop me. He said, that's good, but he said, no. a4, he really liked queening his a-pawn because the rook on h6 was trapped. If you guys want to look at that game later, Timon Salov, 1988, match game 6, candidates match, you'll see that rook was trapped on the king's side. Terrible. And then Hort knew what to do. That was a long time ago. Surprisingly, Hort wasn't as old as he is now. So he had more, more energy to talk about chess. Anyway, his country no longer exists, but he's a pretty good player. And your opponent's probably pretty good when their name's Vlastimil, right? You play somebody named Vlastimil or Svetozar, you got to watch it. Those guys are good at chess. I just mentioned Svetozar because a friend of mine said that was the greatest name he ever heard. It's like, Svetozar, if only I'd known that before my kids were born. Yeah. All right, I hope you enjoyed this last lecture at the Chess Center. If you're watching, hey, Wes, he's not watching. And once again, we want to thank our sponsor, who is not a ball, he's a person, Jay Wilson. Okay, now he used to be one, then we put some hair on him and now he's fine. Thanks for sponsoring the lecture. You can still sponsor lectures. We're still going to have these, just not in this room, in a bigger room with less people. Also no people. Okay, also a bigger room. All right, I hope you enjoyed that. For the Chess Club and Scholastic Center of Atlanta, this is our last lecture from this room, unless there's more lectures. 50-50. Bye, everybody.